Boker Tov, Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Welcome to the Aliyah day. I am glad to be with you. Hope you're having a great day. Blessings to each and every one of you. Exciting times that we're living in, interesting times, unsettling times. All those things are true all at the same time. Welcome to the Aliyah. Today we're going to be diving into the Torah portion of Korach from the book of Numbers, beginning in Numbers chapter 16. Always an interesting topic, Korach. As I was reading through the scriptures again and looking at some commentary once again, I realized that I kind of feel like I know Korach. Meaning, when I say know Korach, what I mean, I'm not talking about the parasha. I'm talking about the person. I kind of feel like I know him personally. I almost get the feeling like I've met him before. And I'm not talking about, that I lived in another time or reincarnated or anything like that. It's just that the spirit of Korach, that same spirit, I have seen, unfortunately, manifest in people in my lifetime. I've dealt with them, and it's almost like a script that you've seen this movie before. It's really interesting. You'll notice as we go through and looking at this story of Korach, you probably yourself will notice some similarities. There's a term that I have used quite a lot, and that's because it's so prevalent particularly in our modern society. In fact, it almost feels overused, but it's not. And that is the term narcissism or narcissist. I look at Korach, judging him from a psychological, clinical point of view. He comes across as a narcissist, and I think you'll see today as we dive into some insights, particularly beginning with Mayam Loez on this topic. You'll see that narcissism kind of get triggered. Now, what's the root cause of narcissism? Many of you know this already because you've taken my psychology course here at Lapid Judaism. And the answer to that question is the root cause of narcissism is a clinical low self-esteem. Clinical as in, it's really bad psychological problem. You have a clinically low self-esteem. You really, really view yourself as just worthless. Oddly, in the human mind is strange, but the oddly, what that clinically low self-esteem causes is an acute arrogance. And the reason for this is because you have such a low self-esteem that you have to try to compensate for being super arrogant. The other way in which this manifests is that narcissists tend to want to control people, demean people, destroy people. And in fact, there is a clinical term for when narcissists turn on someone. So if you are being controlled or manipulated by a narcissist, and then finally you realize this person is a narcissist, and so you decide to break off the relationship, whatever that relationship may be. But anyway, you decide to break off the relationship or confront the person and let them know that, you realize what they're doing and who they are. Then the clinical term is they will release flying monkeys. I'm not making that up. That's actually a term that is used in the office of psychiatry, that they will release flying monkeys to try to destroy your character, whatever secret that you've told them, maybe, or whatever, in confidence, they'll let that be known, or they'll just make stuff up, which is actually probably 90% of their tactic. But they release the flying monkeys. Now, who are the flying monkeys? Well, the flying monkeys are generally the useful idiots around them who believe them. and they're flying monkeys. The flying monkeys don't have to be people. They could be other things. They could be made up, social media profiles. But again, this going back to the question of why does a narcissist release flying monkeys? Well, because in order to make themselves feel better about themselves, which is, by the way, impossible because they're clinically low self-esteem people. It's unfortunately, a lot of narcissists are beyond help. But anyway, in order to try to make themselves feel better about themselves, they try to destroy you. Tearing you down makes them feel better. And so we're going to see this all in Korach. It's really quite interesting from a psychological point of view. In a way, as I said, I feel like I know Korach personally. I really do. When I say that, I mean, I'm not being facetious. I feel like I know him personally. I feel like I've treated him before in my office of psychiatry that I got through a life experience. But on the one hand, I find it interesting, and interestingly, on the other hand, I find it's kind of boring. I'm kind of bored. Korach bores me, and perhaps it's because I've had so much, experience dealing with these kinds of people in my, 30 plus years here, going on plus. I just kind of boring, kind of yawn, and that's just me. One thing I want to say before we get into the greetings and start to read the insights, the other thing I want to say too is that you've heard me say before that I doing what I do, I kind of feels I kind of feel helpless. Sometimes I wonder. Sometimes I wonder if what I'm doing on a daily basis, and I know what I'm about to say, I know I'm having a positive effect on people's lives. You're obviously, those of you who are with me today are a testimony to that. But I can't help but feel sometimes that I'm just kind of spinning my wheels. That it just seems like this is an impossible task to bring the Lapid Judaism gospel to the world. It seems impossible. There's so much delusion out there. And it's not just amongst the usual suspects. It's stuff that people are delusional about is so black and white. The president of the United States dropped bombs on Iran this last week. I'm glad he did. I'm totally for it. It's way overdue. The Iranians have killed hundreds of Americans, to include 241 Marines in 1983. Some of the Marines I served with were there when that happened. But anyway, now, regardless of your political disposition, whether you agree or disagree about should we or should we not have done that, there's a delusion out there on both sides that are aghast that the president of the United States did that without asking Congress for approval. And the reason I bring this up, and maybe it's a bad example, I don't know, but it's delusional. Do you know how many presidents have done military strikes like this? Biden, Obama, Clinton, Bush, Reagan. I mean, we could go back, JFK. I mean, it's just without getting. Do you know the last time we actually got a declaration of war? If I'm not mistaken, the last time the United States had a declaration of war, if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say that was 1941 after Pearl Harbor. Have we had any? If I'm wrong, please tell me, but I maybe I'm not. But anyway, my point to bringing that up is because I try to use it as a recent event, is because it is absolutely delusional to think that the president of the United States has to get Congress's approval to make a military strike. if you don't know that, I don't know. I'm glad to be the one to help you. Okay. To declare war, yeah, we need Congress. To make a military strike, no. It baffles the mind that there are politicians, lawmakers who don't know that. Anyway, let me get back to the topic here. I didn't want to get political, and I don't really, whatever side you're on, it doesn't matter. It's not germane to the fact that a president can do it. Whether you agree or disagree is irrelevant. What's relevant is the president has the power to do so, period. It's totally constitutional. Okay. And if you don't understand that, Obama dropped like, I don't know how many thousands of bombs on people. Agree, disagree. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about the power of the president. Okay. Now, the reason I bring this up is because sometimes I feel like when I'm presenting truth and facts, people are just delusional about it. And that makes me feel helpless. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay. Because how do you converse with somebody like that? Bill Murray had a statement that was funny and also true. He said, it's really, really hard to win an argument with a smart person. He said, it's impossible to win an argument with a stupid person. Now, I would substitute in this conversation stupid with delusional. Like, you can look at a fact and say it's not true. How do you deal with that? Well, I'm comforted psychologically with reading stories like Korach, because in our last parashah with respect to the spies, and he told them, I'm upset and here's why. And it had to do with their lack of wanting to keep the Torah, etc. In other words, everybody saw that HaShem was the one who was upset, and HaShem was the one who made the evil decree to die in the wilderness. And yet Korach this is part of Korach's problem. Korach blamed Moses, and he gaslighted everybody into believing that Moses was the reason why they were suffering in the wilderness now. And that's pure delusion. But it does make me feel better knowing that Moses, and I'm not comparing myself to Moses by any stretch of the imagination. That would be delusional. But it does comfort me to know that Moses himself dealt with this level of delusion. How do you teach a people who can't see that when God himself manifests, and you're blaming me, and you saw, everybody saw God's manifest and say that this is the problem, and you're blaming me? It gives me a level of comfort. And it should give you a level of comfort. We live in a world that you look around and go, how can, you might be talking to your friends or family and think, how can you not see this? And ladies and gentlemen, this is the human condition. We have not been seeing it for a long time because we just don't want to see it, I think. I think maybe that's the issue, okay? John says World War II was the last time Congress declared war. Thank you, John. I was pretty sure that my fact was accurate there, but I just want to check myself. Have we had any wars since World War II? I'm a little rusty on that, John. John, has America had ground troops anywhere else in the world at war since World War II? I'm just wondering. I don't know. Thank you, John, for that fact check. I don't presume that I'm right all the time. I just have to make sure. Good morning, Johan. Good morning, Chris and Crystal. Good morning, Denise. Good morning, Katura. Good morning, Ariela. Rafaela. Good morning, Gianna and Greg and Nellie Grace. Wendy de los Santos. Good morning to you. Good morning, Hepzibah, Beer to Pray. Peaches, who's formerly from Georgia. Good morning. Yes, good morning, John and Alita. And did I say Hepzibah? Good morning, Hepzibah. Good morning, Jubilee. Good morning, Joe. Good morning, Rehoboth. Tim, Boker Tov to you. Thank you. It was an amazing Shabbat, and I'm glad to have been part of it. Good morning, Micaiah. Good morning, Sergio and Sarah Merritt. Hope you and Shannon are doing great. Good morning, Daniel and Jimmy and Keturah, Boker Tov. Good morning, Emmanuel and Ona. And Sarah Yochana, Boker Tov to you. Good morning, Kim. Good morning, Anna. Good morning, Miriam. Leslie, Boker Tov. Yosef, Boker Tov to you. Hannah, Boker Tov. Good morning, Yitzhak. Good morning, Shoshana Brenner. There's the Rebbitzin. Good morning. Good morning, Zach and Rayford. Good morning, Heather Wilson. Boker Tov to you. Heather, I got Zachary's message, by the way. I'm remiss in not getting back to him, but I just want, in case you talk to him before I do, let him know that I see him. Good morning, Greenridge and Ahava. Good to see you this morning. Je t'aime, matwa, je t'aime. Yeah, that's right. Projection is a huge thing. Good morning, Joseph. Let's see. Je t'aime, matin, je t'aime, matutu, je t'aime, le tu. All right, Baruch HaShem. I think I got everybody. I want to make sure. Did I say good morning to Donna? Good morning, Donna. Good morning, Lantern Signals. Good to see you this morning. Lantern Signals, are you in Washington, D.C. normally? Seems like you might have told me that before, but I didn't realize you're actually in Washington, D.C. All right, good morning. Joe, I don't think we actually declared war in Vietnam. Oh, you're saying we went to war in Vietnam. That's right. Yes, of course. Yes, that's true. We also went to war in Korea and Iraq twice. And what was the other place? Afghanistan. Who can forget Afghanistan? Anyway, just wanted to point this out for anybody who might be wanting to know. So let's look at this story of Korach. I'm going to begin with Mam Loez. Mam Loez starts out kind of explaining how Korach got incited into rebellion. And what Mam Loez does from the outset, as you'll see, is he really highlights how Korach's number one problem was his wife. And there's another story, and I've told this story before. Those of you who are veterans of Lapid have heard this story before, but there's the wife of On, who ends up being a model for the Jewish woman and the Jewish wife. And she actually saves not only her husband's life, but she ends up saving her life and her, I don't know if they had kids or not, but their family's life, because everybody who sided with Korach died, including their wives and family. And so Korach's wife is an instigator here. And we're going to see that as we dive into this. So it says, and Korach, son of Yitzhar, who is a grandson of Kehath and great-grandson of Levi, began a rebellion along with Dathan and Aviram, sons of Eliav, and On, son of Peleth, descendants of Reuben. So it says Moses had just been teaching the Israelites about the commandment of tzitzit. This is in Mam Loez's commentary. So when Korach returned home and his wife asked him what new things were brought up by Moses in the course of the day's assembly, he replied, "Today he instructed us in a new commandment, that of putting on fringes, tzitzit, of blue wool." "What does this commandment of blue wool mean?" asked his wife. And Korach replied, "He told us in God's name that we must affix fringes on each of the four corners of a four-cornered garment, 3 threads of white wool and 1 of blue wool." "He is playing games with you," she said. "Every day he comes to you with something new and says that God has so commanded him, but in fact, all these things he says are on his own, as they come to him on the spur of the moment." Wow. Now, ladies and gentlemen, have any of you ever seen this type of thing happen before? Where a spouse will incite their spouse to a rebellion like this. And here we see Korach's wife is the instigator of rebellion. And what she's doing here, if you pay close attention, if you have to use your psychological skills, which you learned in the Lapid Judaism psychology course, she is pushing his buttons with respect to his low self-esteem, which is triggering now his narcissism. She says he's playing games with you. He's making this up. In other words, now Korach feels foolish. Korach already has low self-esteem, and his wife just pushed that narcissism button. And now this is what triggers him with respect to the narcissism. Okay. It says, it goes on to say here, if blue wool is so potent that with one thread the obligation is fulfilled, let me make for you and for those with you a prayer shawl, that is a talit, entirely of techelet. Take them to Moses and ask him what law applies to such a talit, whether or not it must have blue fringes attached to it, and you will see what answer he gives you. Then you will realize that everything he told you was of his own invention, designed to make himself great, a king no less, and to have his brother appointed high priest. Now she's accusing him of nepotism, and his nephews priestly deputies. Okay. Now, I don't know if it's going to, yes. Okay. I was wondering if she was going to bring this up here in this. I know she did. This was brought down in another source, but here it says it as well. So she's telling him, look, he's doing this just to control you. He's making this up to make a fool of you. He set himself up as a king. He set his brother up as a high priest. He set his nephews up as priestly deputies. And then she goes on to say, and then he says, give the teruma offering to the priest, he declares, the firstborn to the priest, while you, though who you are, receive nothing but the maser, a tenth part of which you must then separate to the other priests. So in other words, she's now accusing Moses of taking the best of the best. So he's done all of this just so that he can enrich himself monetarily and with power. Okay, so this is a very, very poor. I kind of feel sorry for Korach now, actually, because his wife here is really in his head. But of course, Korach is going to take these allegations. He's going to carry them forward. And Moses is going to be accused of all of this, right? Of seeking power, of making up the commandments. Don't you see that today? Somebody just recently over the weekend said, so do you stone people? And of course, that's a very common slur by the Jew hater. But what the person doesn't know is that it's God who said to stone people. Now, do we stone people? Well, no. And even back in the day when that was a possibility, there was a whole due process. You had to have 21 judges. You had to have witnesses. You had to have all kinds of disclosure, and it was very, very involved. And as a result, no one was ever stoned by the court. Actually, it was so difficult to render such a penalty it never happened. And so, but anyway, that's not really the point. The point is that people in asking that question, which is a question that people do not ask in sincerity. When somebody says, so do you stone people today? That is not being asked in sincerity. That is somebody who is mocking or attempting to mock the Jewish people. It's deeply anti-Semitic. Its root is Jew hatred. But here's what they don't realize. They're not mocking the Jewish people. They're mocking God. It's God who laid down the law of corporal punishment. And so by making that comment, doing it sarcastically as they do, they're actually mocking God. This woman was mocking God. And now he's accusing Moses, and he's going to accuse Moses of enriching himself. And these allegations, by the way, they're always made. They're so tiresome. They're so please, But it goes on to say here, if that was not enough, she said, he ridicules you, for he has not bidden all the Levites. Has he not bidden all the Levites to shave their hair from their heading, claiming that God has told him to have shaved their entire bodies with a razor? Okay, so she's talking here about the laws related to preparing the Levites for their service. It was a purity law, and God said to shave all the hair on their body. And she said he's making fun of you. He's ridiculing you by doing this. And he said, and has he not also said that God commanded him to designate the Levites as a wave offering, whereby Aaron lifts each of the Levites in turn and shakes him like a lulav in all directions? Surely he means this to ridicule and humiliate you. This lady's a piece of work. But I've met her. I know her too. I've met her as well, actually, now that I look at it. But yeah, she's just saying can you see here how she's really, really pushing his buttons? So it goes on to say, but Korach answered, it is not true that he has done this in order to laugh at us, for has he not himself done the same, shaving off his hair in the same way that we did? So Korach is trying to speak a little sense into his wife. It's not going to work. Goes on to say, you cannot prove anything from the fact that he too shaved off his hair, retorted his wife. He is simply indulging in a little bit of may I perish together with the Philistines kind of thought, she says. He does not mind poking fun at himself so long as he can make you all appear like fools and look ridiculous. Okay. Now, what should Korach have done here? Okay. What should Korach have done at this juncture? Well, I mean, some could say rebuke his wife. That's true. And look, to the wives out there, you do have to be careful. There are superpowers of both sexes. Okay. And one of the superpowers of the wife, and this is in all sincerity and very serious here, the wife does in fact have to be very careful, because I'm speaking to wives, but really this is true of women in general. Okay, you are endowed with one of your superpowers is influence. Women just influence men. They may or may not influence other women. I'd have to have a woman tell me whether or not that was true. But I can only speak to you from a man's point of view. Women have significant influence on a man. Okay? And particularly, of course, the wife, naturally. So women do have to be careful, and as a godly woman, you have to make sure that your influence is the right influence, and it's not done for any other selfish or, God forbid, ungodly motivation. But Korach should have, I would suggest, should have rebuked his wife. This is one of the moments where, that influence should have been rejected. And Korach, of course, should have gone and talked to Moses. Okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, a little healthy community advice. In any family, in any community, There are going to be misunderstandings. There are going to be disagreements. There's going to be various challenges related to that. You're going to hear things that you've been told, so and so said this, blah blah, and you're going to be aghast, like, oh, what? That doesn't sound right. That's crazy. That's people are going to attempt to get you to take up the offense for their offense. You're going to have Korachs, unfortunately. Hopefully in a healthy community, we root them out. But my point is that in any family structure, there are disagreements. People get on your nerves from time to time. All of us have different personalities and different quirks, and this one frustrates me because they do this, and that's just, it's normal. It's not, we don't live in a Hallmark movie. I watch these Hallmark movies, and it's like the man becomes sweet on some woman, and she's got kids, and the kids are like, oh yay, are you gonna be my new daddy? And I just laugh. Rebbetzin and I laugh when we watch these movies, because it's like, yeah, said no kid ever. Usually it's like, you're not the daddy of me. That's really how life actually works. But listen, we don't live in a Hallmark movie. It's not all sweet sugar bubble gum all the time. But here's what I really wanted to say about that. How can we avoid conflicts or misunderstandings metastasizing into something in which there has to be a breakup? Somebody has to leave. And the answer is really simple. You go to that person and have a conversation. And I'm not just talking about leadership. I'm talking about amongst yourselves. Somebody comes to you and, I don't know. I think I heard Susie said that, blah, blah. And, oh my God, can't believe. Well, go and talk to Susie, have a chat, say, hey, are you okay? I kind of heard this, da, da, da. And and here's the thing, 99.9% of the time, whatever you heard or whatever you thought or whatever you perceived, I'm going to tell you right now, whatever you speculated about, 99.9% of the time, it was a misread. You misheard, you misunderstood. It wasn't what you thought. It's 99.9% of the time. Okay. The person, you're like, well, I'm upset because da 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 da, and I said this and you said that, and I knew you were dissing me, and it really hurt my feelings. And the person be like, I'm sorry, what? I have no idea what you're talking about. Oh no, I wasn't even talking to you. Oh no, you misunderstood me. I was talking to Fred, and you just happened to be walking by, and you thought I was talking to you. No, da da da. And you're like, oh man, I'm just telling you, I've been around the block. This is 99.9% of the time. Whatever you think is negative, it's not. 99.9% of the time. And this can be easily resolved by a conversation. I'll have to say that every time that I've had a conversation with somebody who's got it, they like what we're talking about, I would have to say that the vast majority of the time, the situation is completely resolved. I was like, oh yeah, I didn't realize. But we just go about our business. The times when it doesn't get resolved is when there's no communication. So the point being here is that communication is the key to everything in life. Just communicate, talk, have a conversation. And that's what Korach should have done. He should have gone to Moses and said, hey, Moses, what's going on here? And then Korach evidently wanted to be a priest. He was a Levite. He was a very prominent Levite, in fact. And he wanted more, which there's nothing necessarily wrong about that. I'm not against, and I don't think it's wrong to have ambition. Even if you have much, it's not wrong to desire more, as long as it's healthy. Okay. At the same time, you should be grateful for what you do have. Okay. It seems like Korach wasn't. But nevertheless, if he wanted more, in this case, to be a priest, then my view is he should have just gone to Moses and asked. Now, I don't know for sure if Hashem would have granted Korach his heart's desire. I don't know that for sure because it's a hypothetical. And you cannot ever, know for sure with respect to a hypothetical. But I do believe that had Korach humbly gone to Moses and said to Moses, hey, cousin, I'm very, very grateful for being a Levite, and particularly to be in a senior position as a Levite, like a prince, basically. And it's very, very meaningful to me, and I'm so grateful. But my heart's desire is to really serve Hashem to the uttermost and to be a priest. And I realize that, I can't be a priest because I'm not a son of Aaron. But I really, really, this is just in my heart. Now, it's possible, and I don't know if it would have happened or not, but I think that Hashem would have granted Korach's desire. That, maybe Moses would have gone and talked to Hashem about it. And Hashem either would have granted Korach's desire or perhaps explained to Korach, why he needed him to do what he was doing. So, in other words, a lot of the things that we desire in life can be achieved through simple humility and asking. It all goes back to communication. You have not because you ask not, right? So it says, when Korach heard all that his wife had said. And so here, unfortunately, Korach is not watching the Aliyah day. If Korach had been watching the Aliyah day, he would have not been Korach. This is hashtag subscribe. So it says, when Korach heard all that his wife had said, he was driven to gather people about him and challenge Moses. So here's, when people come to you and look, you need to know this is true. Okay. I just trust me on this. So-and-so has a problem with, okay, let's go back up. X has a problem with Y. So X is calling you to talk about the problem they have with Y. And maybe they're coming to you because they want to talk it through, or they want to pray with them, or get your advice. Here's what you need to know. Okay. That's not why they're calling you. They don't care about your advice. They sure as Hades don't want your prayers. Okay. And they're not calling you to talk it through. Here's why they're contacting you: to gather soldiers. They're gathering a crowd. They're gathering a mob. They're buying the Korach flag and asking you to wave it in the streets of LA. That's why they're contacting you. Okay. And when that happens, and here's how you'll know that what I told you is the absolute fact. Okay. Here is your kryptonite to Korach. When X calls you to complain about Y, or to ask you to pray, or to talk it through, whatever they're gaslighting you about, what you need to say is, have you talked to Y? And when they tell you, they'll hem-haw and go, well, no. And anyway, the answer is no. And then you say, well, you should go talk to Y. And when they start to give you reasons why they won't or can't or shouldn't or whatever, hang up. Or otherwise disengage. That's how you know. And now it's not a question of, well, maybe they are calling me for it. No, they're not. Like there's 100% chance that they're not calling you for that. They're calling you to recruit. And that's what Korach was doing. Korach went around and recruited people. Why? Because he's a narcissist. And they're so low self-esteem, they don't have the confidence. They don't have the fortitude to go on their own. They're scared little people. Okay? They can't fight their way out of a wet paper bag. Okay? They don't have what it takes to go mano a mano, face to face. They're scared little kids. And they need you and a bunch of yous to make them have the courage, okay, to confront. And that's what's going on. So Korach goes and gets a bunch of people around to challenge Moses. Okay. And toward that purpose, he began to move about the Israelite camp. And where he was not recognized, since his hair was shaved off completely, including his mustache, beard, and eyelashes. But when anyone asked him who had done all this, he would answer, Moses did it to me, and not only to me, but to all the Levites. He also shook each of us bodily as if we were lulavim, declaring, you are pure, you are pure. His brother Aaron, however, he has attired in embellished robes and set him up like the bride in the communion tent. Making everybody really hate Moses and Aaron now, right? So it was that when the enemies of Moses heard these things, the enemies of Moses, they too began to sharpen their knives against him and to incite the Israelites. How is it possible to suffer this Moses? They grumbled. Himself he has appointed king. His brother, he's made the high priest. His two nephews, he's set up as the deputy priest. The teruma offering belongs to the priest, and so do the rest of the 24 priestly gifts. As a result, a great crowd gathered around Korach, and he began to ridicule Moses and to mock him by fabricating lies. Well, it goes without saying that eventually the Korach has to just start making stuff up. And, recently I put out the publication about the Talmudic forgeries. And some of you have, you can get that on rabbigriffin.blog, combating Talmudic forgeries. Some of you have read that, and you've seen that the vast majority of those quotes from the Talmud that the Jew haters put out there, that almost all of them, in fact, are just completely fabricated. They're completely made up. They literally do not exist. And so, I would sit here and say, if you find yourself making up lies, you should know that you're in a bad place. I say that as a warning, but at the same time, I also recognize through, experience guided, wisdom guided by experience, is that if you're at that juncture, it's too late. You don't even know you're making up lies. Of course, most of us know that people can promote a lie so much that they can, in fact, become to believe it. And so you might be interacting with someone and you're thinking, my gosh, what they're saying is just absolutely not true. I mean, come on. We won our independence from Great Britain, not Japan. How could they possibly be saying that we defeated the Japanese at, Concord? And I mean, or whatever, or Bunker Hill, or what have you. And there comes a point at which people start believing their own lies, and they become, convinced of it. And so, on the one hand, I kind of speak to the rational among us, at the same time recognizing that there's some people who are just irrational. So it says, listen, and I will tell you of this unfortunate widow. This is now Korach making stuff up. Listen, and I will tell you of this unfortunate widow who once lived near me with her two daughters, all of whose possessions consisted of a small field from which she eked out a living for herself and for them. One day, when she had just begun to plow her field, Moses came to her and said, be careful not to plow by using an ox and a donkey together, for God has commanded, do not plow with an ox and a donkey together. Then she came to sow her field, and Moses said to her, be careful not to seed your field with mixed seeds, for God has commanded, do not plant your field with different species of seeds. She came to reap, and Moses said, now take care not to pick up the individual stalks that have fallen, nor go back to retrieve the forgotten sheaves, nor completely harvest to the ends of the field. Now, when she was about to put the grain into storage, Moses said to her, you must separate the teruma offering for the Cohen priest, and the first maaser of the Levite, and the second maaser. Now the widow suffered in silence and fulfilled all that Moses had commanded her. But having done so, she concluded that it was not worthwhile to maintain the field and to have all this on her head. The law is too hard, too much. It's too burdensome. So she sold the field and bought 2 sheep whose wool she planned to shear off and thus provide for herself and her daughters. But when the sheep were about to give birth, Aaron came along and demanded the firstborn, for God had commanded, you must consecrate to God every firstborn among your cattle and your flocks, he told her. The widow suffered in silence and gave him the firstling. Later, when they came to shear the wool, Aaron again appeared, demanding that he be given the inaugural wool, since God had commanded, you must give him the first of your shearings. I see that I have fallen into a trap for which I cannot escape, the widow said to herself, so I will slaughter them instead. But no sooner had she slaughtered the sheep when Aaron again appeared and demanded the foreleg, the jaw, and the maw. I see that even by slaughtering them, I cannot rid myself of your demands, exclaimed the widow. Therefore, I will put everything under a ban, and let us see what he says then. When, however, she placed all that she had under a ban, Aaron said to her, now give me everything, for God has said, everything that the Israelites declare taboo shall be yours. Thus it was, Korach concluded, that after Aaron took away everything that she had, leaving her and her 2 daughters nothing with which to support themselves, they died of hunger. Those are some of the things that Moses and the brothers have perpetrated in the name of God. They say that God commanded him regarding all this, when in fact he has not commanded. Does any of this sound familiar? Isn't it so interesting? But these are the lies, these are the stories that Korach makes up, and it sounds very convincing, doesn't it? Did anybody check the story? Where's the widow? This is how you defeat a Korach, by the way. You start asking for evidence. Start asking for proof. Start asking for witnesses. That's how you defeat the Korach, it says. It goes on to say here, and we conclude with this. How awful is the power of evil speech, as revealed in this episode, considering the effect produced by his listeners of the story that Korach had made up and told them. Although he knew that what he was telling them was a malicious fabrication, false from beginning to end, nonetheless, his words entered their heart. That's why you shouldn't even listen to Korach, because least something enter your heart. End of our Aliyah today. We'll come back tomorrow and continue this conversation and see what happened to Korach, what happened to On, what happened to Dathan and Aviram. It's all very interesting. It's very pertinent to our life, as I say, because we see these kinds of peoples in all walks of life, no matter where we are. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so, comment on the video after the fact, and otherwise have a great and beautiful day, and I will look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Shalom Aleichem.